Hey everyone, in the last episode we added a feature to our layer system that allows users to move layers of selected objects up and down on the Fabric.js canvas. Many popular programs like Photoshop, Figma and GIMP have additional features such as locking or hiding layers. Today we'll explore how to enable the ability to hide and restore the visibility of layers on the Fabric.js canvas. Before we dive in, make sure you've watched the previous videos about creating the layer management system, so we can build on that code. To get started with this new function, we first need to add a feature that allows us to change the opacity of any selected object on the canvas. If you haven't seen our episode on creating dynamic settings panel for canvas objects, check out building a dynamic settings panel part 2 before continuing. Now let's open our settings.js component and add a state and field to control the opacity property. We'll start by adding a new state variable to store the opacity value. Next, duplicate one of the existing functions like handle color change and rename it to handle opacity change. Make sure to replace setColor with setOpacity to correctly update the opacity state and change the property from fill to opacity. Scroll down to the UI section where we render input fields for selected objects. You will see something like this. Now duplicate the input field and replace value color with opacity and handle color change with handle opacity change. This will allow you to manipulate the opacity of any object on the canvas. Let's test it out. As you can see, we can easily change the opacity of any selected object on the canvas. One more thing, let me quickly update placeholders for our input fields. Here you go. To ensure the UI always reflects the opacity of the selected object, we need to set the opacity inside the handle object selection. Set opacity, object opacity, and clear the opacity when the selection is cleared on the canvas. Now let's move to our layers list.js component to modify the function that handles selecting layers. We'll add a function to control the visibility of the selected object. Let's call it highSelectedLayer. We need to add a check to ensure that the layer is actually selected before we try to manipulate it. This is important to prevent errors if no layer is selected. What's happening here is that if there's no selected layer, the function will immediately stop, preventing further actions. This is a safety check to avoid errors in the code. Next, we need to find the objects on the canvas that matches the selected layer. Fabric.js lets us get all the objects on the canvas with canvas getObjects, and we can filter through them to find the object by its ID. Here, canvas getObjects returns all the objects, and find searches for them to find the object that has the same ID as the selected layer ID. If no object is found, object will be undefined. Now we need another check to make sure that the object exists before we proceed. If no object is found, for instance object is undefined, the function stops here and doesn't do anything. Now comes the fun part. We want to toggle the visibility of the object by changing its opacity between 0 and visible and its original opacity. We start by checking if the object is currently invisible. For example, its opacity value is set to 0. For instance, if the object's opacity is already 0, we restore its original opacity. We store the original value in a custom property called prefOpacity, so that we can refer to it later. If there was no original opacity, we set it to 1, making the object fully visible. Now, if the object is visible, we set its opacity to 0, making it invisible. But before doing that, we need to store the current opacity in prefOpacity, so we can restore it later. Here, if the object is visible, we store the current opacity value in a prefOpacity property, and then set the opacity to 0 to hide the element on the canvas. Now that we have changed the opacity, we need to update the canvas and the layer panel to reflect these changes. The canvas render all tells Fabric.js to re-render the entire canvas so the changes are visible. Then, the update layers function is called to update the layers panel, ensuring the UI stays in sync with the changes on the canvas. Finally, we need to update the state of the selected layer to reflect the new opacity of the object. This way, we always have the current opacity stored in the selected layer state. By updating selected layer with both the ID and the new opacity, we ensure that the selected layer state is kept in sync with the object's opacity on the canvas. Our previous function for moving layers up and down didn't account for storing the opacity state of the selected layer. We need to make a couple of small changes to handle this. First, update how we find the selected object by using selected layer ID, because we store the ID directly now. Next, update the update layer function to include the opacity property for each object. Finally, for functions like handle object selected and selected layer in canvas, we need to ensure that both the ID and the opacity are set in the selected layer state. Now we'll add a button to the UI that will trigger the hide selected layer function when clicked. We'll use an icon button to do this. This button will show an open eye icon when the layer is visible and a closed icon when the layer is hidden. It will also call hide selected layer when clicked, and the button will be disabled if no layer is selected. Feel free to use my React icon library, Cebico Studio-icons. Let's head back to browser window and test our new feature. As you can see, it works as designed. You've just added a new feature that lets you hide and restore layers on the Fabric.js canvas. You have also learned how to extend Fabric.js objects with custom properties like pref opacity, giving you more control over the canvas and layer visibility. If you like this video, don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Stay tuned for more, and I will see you in the next video.